You want to know why ICE agents wear masks? It's because they know what technology makes possible when you show your face to the world. We're going to look today at the incredible surveillance apparatus that ICE has built using off-the-shelf technologies from a wide variety of cutting-edge companies and what they mean for your privacy going forward. I'm Jake Ward. This is the Rip Current. We look at the big invisible forces that are shaping your life. And as we have been tracking events in Minneapolis, where ICE has already killed two people, two American citizens, arrested hundreds and hundreds of people, often on a very thin pretext, and begun arresting not just protesters, but also journalists, it has us, of course, looking at all of the ways in which this might, signal the future of certainly the Trump administration and everything else that's going on around here. So one of the ways that I think about this is the surveillance technology that is deployed in this. And we've seen some of that already it's being covered in a very good and thorough way by a wide range of outlets, including the Washington Post, which put up a big story just last week, the powerful tools in ICE's arsenal to track suspects and protesters, that does a run through of all of the different kinds of technology that are being used. PBS has just put out its own big report in partnership with the Associated Press about the surveillance apparatus being deployed in sweeping up citizens. And all of this is really a very good reminder of just how much is available to law enforcement when it comes to surveilling citizens, often without any need on their part for any kind of warrant or oversight, really of almost any kind. So it really has me realizing why it is that ICE wears these masks. It's because they are so familiar with what can happen to you when your face is photographed in public. So the number of there are a wide range of technologies being used here, and I want to kind of run through a few of them here because it's really it's such a powerful and important thing to understand. So, as I say, multiple major outlets have been covering this because ICE has this enormous budget, $2.7 billion given to it to purchase all sorts of technologies, but especially AI-enabled technology that will facilitate its mission. And so that includes things like iris scanners with a company called BI2, facial recognition from a company called Clearview AI. I have interviewed that CEO in the past and reported on that company, and a new product called Mobile Fortify, cell phone location data, which comes through all sorts of actual commercial operations rather than just private ones. And then, of course, the enforcement platform from Palantir, which is about a $30 million project. And all of this is just a showing of how this kind of panopticon of surveillance is growing. So I was in Brazil over the summer, and Brazil is a nation that has really been one of the big customers for a Chinese system that is a big sort of export out of China called the Safe Cities. Sometimes they call it the Smart Cities program. And this is a all-in-one surveillance package that Chinese companies will sell to any country that wants it. And the capital cities of all these different countries have bought it. Quito, Ecuador, Karachi, Pakistan, Lagos, Nigeria. And these are systems that take a facial recognition system and combine it with the tracking of your subway cards, the places where you use your phone to buy things, all of that stitched together into this, all-in-one surveillance system. And Rio, not a capital city, but Rio is one of these customers. And it's so interesting to fly into that country, and right from the outset, you walk down this long corridor, and they just tell you, remove your hat and walk this corridor. It's a long corridor. And they are photographing you from every possible angle, clearly. And at the end of it, they just sort of give your papers a cursory inspection because they know they've got your face. They don't have to worry about the rest of it, really. And then throughout the city, on the beaches, in the markets, in the restaurants, you are just on camera all the time. There are Chinese-made surveillance cameras everywhere. And it is up until now, it's really been a sort of unthinkable thing to imagine that we in the United States would think about this. Another example of this that I've seen in the past, I was covering the Ukrainian protests in 2014 against Russia and its incursion into the Ukraine. And at that time, the protesters who were it was very similar to Minneapolis. They were in the depths of winter, and they were, pushing back against Russian encroachment wherever they could. And as they were protesting, there were drones flying overhead that were capturing their faces. And then they would, every so often, get notices on their phone that say, you have been registered in a database of agitators and protesters. You are part of an illegal gathering, these sort of intimidation efforts and these geofencing efforts. Well, now you have this incredible variety of technologies being deployed here in the United States against American citizens. We know that, for instance, they're using a system from Thomson Reuters that allows license plate tracking. And what's so interesting is when you look at the sort of off-the-shelf descriptions, the marketing that comes out of these companies looking at this stuff, they very often are talking about sort of these other purposes that then clearly a law enforcement official can map onto what they need. And in this case, they have this system that they are selling as a way of building trust in public schools, leveraging technology for accurate student residency, right? You got to live in the school district where you send your kid to school. And some people game that system. And so this is Thomson Reuters saying, we can change this. We can figure out for you whether your students and their families actually live there. So here's one of the places: license plate recognition data for pattern analysis. Thomson Reuters incorporates data into Clear. This is the system that ICE uses, enabling districts to establish actual residency patterns without intrusive home visits. If a parent claims residence at one address, but LPR, license plate recognition data, shows their vehicle routinely parks overnight at another location, this provides clear evidence for further investigation, right? So you can imagine the utility of this for ICE or any law enforcement official that wants to follow the movements of a person. Once they've got their license plate, then they can begin tracking them. So that's one. Another really powerful and important piece of technology is this, the thing I accidentally clicked on a moment ago, which is this thing called a cell site simulator. These are colloquially known as stingrays, and we've encountered these many, many times. I've encountered these many times as a reporter. This is a Office of the Inspector General report from 2023 that basically says that law enforcement agencies are not following their responsibilities with this stuff, that especially the U.S. Secret Service, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, and Homeland Security investigations did not always adhere to federal statute and cell site simulator policies when using this technology during criminal investigations. One of the things that we know, for instance, so what a stingray is, and the Washington Post illustrates this pretty well, what a stingray is a way of basically impersonating a cell phone tower such that your phone registers with the law enforcement agency's box rather than with the cell phone tower, and as a result hands over its unique identifier, its IMEI code. And through that, law enforcement can, either through a warrant with Verizon or Comcast or one of these providers, can either get your name and number out of that. There are also other ways to do that. They can then combine that with something like a system that would look into, so first of all, right, the Stingray system, you're supposed to get a warrant for this, but very often it turns out, are either not doing that, just ignoring it completely, or they also sometimes use what's called parallel prosecution, where they will pretend that information came from an informant rather than owning up to it coming from a piece of technology, which gets them around it. So then the problem is you then combine that with, once you've got somebody's name and number, you can then go and find out all kinds of information about them in terms of their, first of all, their location. So there is a 2018 Supreme Court ruling that supposedly set a precedent about this. It was called Carpenter versus the United States. And it showed that mobile phone location data reveals so much about people's lives that you got to have a warrant to access it from phone companies, is what this decision said. But what these federal agencies now are doing instead is they just go buy it off the open market, because big data brokers, commercial brokers, they've got everything you need to find out where you are at any given time. Your use of an app that gives up your location data, a weather app, Google Maps, one of these things, means that a lot of these companies just simply have your data. A commercial data broker has it and will just sell it to whoever wants to buy it, including a federal agency. And so that is a big deal. It's been used since the first Trump administration. Then you've got these systems that are able to look inside the phone once you have it. So once you have the phone number. And so this, from the Washington Post reporting, is a company called Celebrite. That's an Israeli firm that has phone hacking technology where you can either, if you have the phone physically and can plug it into a device, or in some cases even remotely through a message sent to the phone, it can invisibly access the phone such that it's then seeing basically everything into it. It can hack into these phones remotely. And ICE wanted to buy this technology back under the Biden administration. The Biden administration said no. Now the Trump administration has reversed that freeze such that ICE can do it again. That freeze was reversed last year. So one thing I wanted to sort of talk about or end with here as I start to wind this down is the very loose regulations that govern this stuff. One of the things that is going on with something, with these AI-enabled systems, which are, according to many sources now, are being actively used. There's body cam footage of ICE officers using ChatGPT to write their reports. And we're seeing these AI systems that will synthesize tips and all sorts of things into a single database and say, this is where you should go. This is the person you're looking for, right? The decision-making of these authorities is increasingly coming to rely on AI in the same way that is true, for all of us, right, who are using it in our work. And the problem with that, of course, is that you have a world in which, even if you agree with the idea that this, is a law enforcement agency that's carrying out a legitimate mission. And of course, there's a huge controversy about that statement alone. The vast majority of Americans polled at this point are not in favor of how ICE is conducting its business. But even if you're in theory in favor of the idea that there should be some immigration enforcement, the idea that law enforcement officers are going to rely on AI to make choices for them should be really worrisome to you. And that's because we've already seen that in a case of something like facial recognition, officers who are told by the companies, don't rely on this as your single source of information. Instead, use this just to ratify your existing channels of investigation. It turns out those officers are not doing that. They are just relying on these systems, because we all do, right? You give us a system that lets us make a decision, that makes a decision for us, and we're happy to let it do that. Well, law enforcement is no exception to that. And so we've seen case after case. I interviewed a protester who was arrested during the Ferguson protests. He was tracked down clearly by a facial recognition system, and the watch commander in the crowd of police officers that came to his house to get him was filmed over his shoulder with a flyer that had his facial recognition profile on there, and clearly that was how they had made these choices. So the problem with that is oversight of AI technologies at the federal level depends on whether it is used as the primary source of decision-making for that for that investigative body. And if it's the primary source of a decision, then it falls under all sorts of really important and complex regulations that in theory could kind of, pull back on somebody's use of this stuff. But if the agency instead says, no, we're not using this as a primary source of decision-making, it is just a secondary tactic, a secondary tool, and this is entirely up to them to self-report it, then it doesn't fall under any regulations. There's no middle ground here. It's binary. Either this high level of regulation applies if it's the primary source of determination, or no regulation applies. That's the world we live in at this point. And the reason that we should all be concerned about that is that at this point, we know that, the Department of Homeland Security is actively using at least 200 different pieces of AI in what it does, which is a 37% increase from July of 2025. That's according to its own AI inventory. And these are systems that are for facial recognition, for pattern of life stuff, for all sorts of surveillance work that in many cases interconnects with incredibly scary and open-ended facial recognition and data broker, phone location database stuff. It's all very alarming. And ICE alone added 25 AI use cases since its disclosure last summer. And this is stuff that includes processing tips, reviewing mobile device data relevant to investigations, confirming identities of individuals via biometric data, and detecting intentional misidentification. This is really important and powerful stuff that is beginning to intersect with parts of our lives that we didn't even know were going to be used to surveil Americans, including a system from Palantir that draws on Medicaid data to understand where people are, who they are, and their patterns of life. So all of this is cause for concern, and it just deepens our sense here that AI is not just about writing funny jokes and your wedding vows. It is about facilitating what the majority of Americans consider a vast overreach in terms of our civil liberties and the surveillance apparatus that has been built all around us.
The Rip Current is produced and created by me, Jacob Ward. And if you liked this show and you want more content like this, go to theripcurrent.com, where I publish a weekly newsletter that covers these same sorts of stories of the big invisible forces that have us all in their grip. And if you want to really do me a favor, if you could go to where you have listened to this or watched it and like it, share it, or even better, review it. Holy cow, is that helpful? It's the best possible way for me to find a new audience. I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for listening.